In early 1848, the entire population of settlers across all of California would fit in a moderate-sized high school gym, numbering less than 1,000 people. By the end of just the following year, that figure grew exponentially, exceeding 100,000. What happened, and what does that have to do with our health, wellness, and performance? That's exactly what we'll dig into in this special episode. Welcome to the Catalyst 360 podcast, your trusted source for engaging, evidence-based, and practical health, wellness, and performance insights. I'm your host, Dr. Brad Cooper of the Catalyst Coaching Institute, and today we're going to talk about how to tap into the world's greatest mining tool as we both write and rewrite our own stories. On January 24th, 1848, carpenter James Wilson Marshall was digging up some ground to build a water-powered sawmill owned by John Sutter. Sutter's mill eventually became recognized as ground zero for the California gold rush that rapidly grew the population of California and led to their entry into the Union as the 31st state. So, what does that have to do with us? Well, today we're going to discuss what many believe is the world's greatest mining tool, your journal. I get it. Journaling, it can feel like old news. We actually did a survey recently of health and wellness coaches of all people to ask them about journaling. What was the summary? 96% said, yeah, it's important and valuable, but 91% of those individuals said it just doesn't happen consistently. Basically, our survey told us journaling is like flossing your teeth, or exercising, or eating our vegetables, or limiting afternoon caffeine, or turning off your phone and going to bed, or any of those dozens, hundreds of things that coaches help their clients integrate into their lives. And yet, 96% of the coaches, not even just general population, but of these coaches said, yep, journaling, flossing, pretty much the same thing. So let's start with this. There will be no should in this conversation, no guilt included in this discussion. Only opportunity and practical ideas that, just like those early miners, you can take to the bank. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to share with you how to activate what I'm going to call the magnet of journaling, how to tap into why our story is so important, and the opportunity journaling provides to rewrite that story. We'll discuss various strategies for making the process fit you. Don't try to journal like somebody else. Let's make it fit you, and then provide some tips for getting started. The timing of this release is important. We're releasing this the week of Thanksgiving. Our thought was the weeks between now and New Year's, oftentimes that's the catalyst for considering more deeply the way in which we're living our lives. We tend to have a little more pondering going on. We tend to be thinking a little bit about New Year's resolutions and how do I want to be different or grow in the coming year. So that's why we're placing this here in the schedule. It's my hope that this special episode provides you with one very valuable tool for doing exactly that as you move forward. And if you do have a journal or a notebook handy while you're listening, I'll be providing you with a few things to consider that, if you have a pen in hand, might come in handy along the way. So if you want to pause this, go grab that notebook or journal or whatever you've got handy to jot that stuff down. It's probably worth doing. On the coaching front, if you're at a place in your life where you're considering pursuing your coach certification, our next MBHWC approved cohort kicks off in late January. As soon as you register, you'll get access basically to all the on-demand resources, and you can begin that process at any point. And by the way, if you're part of an organization that's looking to stop asking your employees to check a bunch of health and wellness boxes, and instead you want to help them actually fill those boxes, let's talk. Again, the email results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com when you're ready. Now, let's dig into what might just be the world's greatest mining tool here on the latest episode of the Catalyst 360 podcast. Let's start by having you set your own baseline. Where are you today? There's something called the stages of change. Dr. James Prochaska created it. We actually had him on the podcast. It was our first big time special episode. It was number 100, if you want to go back and listen to that. But the stages of change are basically pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. So think about when it comes to journaling, because again, the data is pretty clear. Most of us are like, yeah, journaling is really valuable. No, I don't journal. So where are you in this process? Are you in that pre-contemplation? You're kind of like, yeah, maybe someday I'll think about journaling, or maybe you're in that contemplation. Yeah, I'm thinking maybe doing that. Or preparation, you bought the journal. Maybe it's action. Maybe you've been journaling and you're looking for a few tips to bring that kind of next level. Think about your current spot and maybe just jot that down. Which one are you at right now? Which stage are you in at this point? And then check back in on yourself an hour from now. Once you've finished listening to this, once you've pondered this a little bit, did that shift where you were in the stages of change? And maybe a week from now, once you had a chance to kind of filter through this a little bit, try a few of the things we'll talk about. So stages of change: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance, and relapse. Where would you see yourself in this process? Let's start talking about how to activate the magnet. Let's stop looking at journaling as a should. I should journal. I know I am supposed to journal. Let's clear the table. Get those things off. That doesn't help any of us. Almost never does in any aspect of life. You should eat your vegetables. Ooh, super motivated now. Same thing with journaling. Let's activate the magnet. Let's talk about the value, the benefits, the things that make me want to do it, the things that draw me towards it like a magnet draws. A few things. I've got 10 things here, the value of journaling. First one, it slows us down. If you're listening to the Catalyst 360 podcast, you're not a person that's laying around on the couch all the time. Like, you got stuff happening. You are moving, you're trying to create positive changes in the world, your community, your family, your own life, your clients. Stuff's happening, and we're constantly moving, and we rarely slow down. And when you begin creating a habit of journaling, maybe it's just 5 minutes, but it causes us to slow down for a moment, to breathe a little bit. Second one, it builds in reflection. We've become a society of swipers. Instagram, swiping up. Twitter, swiping up. Studies indicate we have 500,000 thoughts a day, and I don't think that includes all the things that pass through our brains when we're swiping. So our thoughts are happening all the time. When we think about thinking, it's not necessarily an active process. It's just there are thoughts moving through our heads all the time, and as a result, we get this decision fatigue. We don't deal with the thoughts. We just... And I'm sure all of you have the same thing we have, the junk drawer that you just kind of keep throwing stuff into, and then eventually the doggone drawer won't close. So you have to start clearing it out. We do the same thing in our lives. This decision fatigue, we have so many thoughts. We have so many decisions that have to be made. We just put them off. We just go with the default. There was a really interesting study I saw. This is probably about 2 months ago on misinformation or conspiracy theories. And what they found is that if you're talking to somebody who is a conspiracy theorist, or they're super committed to some piece of misinformation, it does not help to be presented with 10 proofs of why that's wrong. Nor does it help to be given 7 or even 5. Because when there's that many, we default to our previous. We go with what we had before. Only when it's 3 or less does it have any impact. And we're saying we have 500,000 thoughts a day. If we're not processing those, if we're not taking the time to reflect, well, we're just staying with our old habits. So the journaling helps us not only slow down, the first one, but purposely creates a time to reflect. And again, folks, there's not a time limit on this. It doesn't have to be an hour or 30 minutes. It might be 5 minutes. But in that 5 minutes, we take a moment to stop and reflect. It's very therapeutics, number 3. Anxiety, regret, grief. The research is very clear. Journaling is very helpful in these areas. Number 4, clarifies our thoughts. And as a result of that, improves our sleep. We have had multiple, I think 5 guests now talking about sleep on the podcast. And there's some of your favorites. There's a good reason for that. We're struggling with sleep on a massive level. If we have our thoughts clarified going into that sleeping period, and as we wake up in the middle of the night, it improves that sleep. Number 5, it solves problems, sometimes as a result of creating dialogue with our subconscious. I love this quote from Leslie Lamport. She's a computer genius. I read through her bio, and you would not even, this bio is unbelievable. So Leslie Lamport's her name. And I love what she says. She says, if you're thinking without writing, you only think you're thinking. Let me say that again. If you're thinking without writing, you only think you're thinking. We're going to circle back on that a little bit later, but it absolutely helps you solve problems as you're writing some things down that you're thinking about. Number 6, it sharpens your memory. You are reading a lot of stuff. You are listening to podcasts and reading articles and popping links on Twitter and different things. You're reading different books, but are you remembering any of it? Is it sticking with you? Is it having an impact? One of the most valuable elements for journaling, and this is a simple way to start if you don't want to get too deep with it, is just have that journal next to you as you're reading, whether it's that article, whether it's that book, whatever it might be, and just jot down a point or two. Powerful process. It can be a goal driver, number 7. You identify what those goals are and you check in with yourself. Maybe it's weekly, maybe it's monthly, maybe it's just quarterly. But you have your list of 2 or 3 or 4 goals and you go back and you say, okay, in these areas, here's how I'm doing in this one. And that process helps move you forward. It improves your mood. Who doesn't want that? That's number 8. It brings reality. I don't know if you're like this, but I have this tendency to go, when something negative happens, I have this bad habit of cycling downward. So this thing happens, not what I was hoping for or expected, or it's actually some very bad news, and I'll just go into this downward cycle. The journaling brings me back to reality. It helps me think, okay, wait a minute. This thing did happen. It's a standalone though. And the next step is not necessarily an extrapolation off of that. Also, in that process of writing, you almost can't help but have things come to mind in terms of next steps. Positive or negative. If it's some negative news, as you're writing down what happened, ideas will naturally come to you on what the potential next step would be. It also helps me, and maybe this is something you see too, when you're flying high, when you're having one of those days and you're just like, man, the world's on fire, this is awesome, to actually collect some valuable ideas. Those days don't come all the time, at least not for most of us. And when they do, why not gather those things together? So great opportunity, improving mood and taking advantage of the upper periods when they come. Number 9, word we're hearing a lot about, cultivates mindfulness. When you're writing, even if you're just sitting there with your journal open, you're not even writing, you create this element of mindfulness that you wouldn't otherwise have. And number 10, it teaches us about ourselves. As you're writing, things you're thinking about, things you're working through, and maybe this brings us all the way back to number 2, that reflection. You're frankly reflecting on, why am I thinking about this? Why is this so important? Why did I act that way? Why did I react that way? What am I going to do next? So you learn a lot about yourself. It also helps us see our perspectives about others. As I'm writing about Susanna or our kids or a friend or a neighbor or a coworker or someone in the community, to put it down in words, I've got to pull that together in some kind of a sensical manner in my head before I'm able to put it on paper. So we're not just swiping. We're actually gathering information and putting it together in a way that makes sense, maybe to us more than anyone else. If you've got your journal there, I want you to take just a couple minutes, hit pause, and write a couple things. Open that journal up, and maybe it's just a notebook. Like, it doesn't have to be a leather-bound, really cool thing. A notebook is fine. If you look at my bookshelf, you'll see a bunch of just notepads that have been my journals over the years. So it doesn't have to be anything official, but if you've got one, I want you to try this little exercise, just kind of get the ball rolling. I'm going to have you do this 3 times throughout this, but I want you to open it up, write today's date, and then write 3 reasons you're thinking you might want to integrate journaling into your life in some way. Now, you're not committing to anything. You're not going to mail this to me. You're not going to send me an email that says, here's a picture of my commitment. None of that. This is just between you and you. But ask yourself, why does this matter to me? And jot down what comes to mind. Or maybe jot a bunch of stuff down and circle 3 that really matter. Like, we don't want too many. It can become overwhelming. But of those 10 I just went through, it slows us down, reflection, therapeutic, clarifies thoughts, solves problems, sharpens memory, goal driver, improves mood, cultivates mindfulness, teaches us about ourselves and our perspectives on others. Are there some of those or things that those brought to your mind that would be in your top 3? So take a moment, hit that pause button, and jot a few of those things down. All right, we're back. Now, my personal favorite question when I'm meeting what I like to call soon-to-be friends is very simple. What's your story? Now, tone is very important to this question. If you say something like, well, what's your story? doesn't really build a relationship. But when asked genuinely, so tell me, what's your story? It opens the door for them to answer it any way they want. They get to share their favorite version. Maybe they want to talk about their career. Maybe they don't. Maybe they want to talk about their family. Maybe they don't. Maybe they want to talk about where they live or when they moved or education pursuits they're going after or a journey they've been going through in life or a trip they just go. It doesn't matter. I didn't ask them about a thing. I said, what's your story? What story would you like to share with me? I love that question. It works great in a group setting. It's a wonderful kind of icebreaker, allows people to go whatever direction they want. But it's so valuable for us as individuals to consider as well. What story are we writing? Are we the victim? Are we the villain? Are we the compassionate hero? Your perspective on that, your decision about which of those will be you, will come to life as you're writing in your journal. If you're constantly complaining about, oh, I never get a chance, and this always happens to me, and I'm always unlucky. Well, folks, it's telling us what story you're writing. The value of going back and seeing what I've written, it can be a powerful reminder, or not even reminder, a powerful eye-opener. Because if I'm portraying that in my journal, what am I portraying out there in the world? Probably an extrapolated version of that. So the story that we're writing, our story, what's your story? We answer that in our journal. It comes to life, and we are the ones who write it. We all have our story. We all have our struggle. We'll have stuff that we're going through. Maybe one of the first things you want to do with your journal is a very difficult but simple exercise. And that's to just go for it. Just write about the struggles you faced, et cetera, et cetera. And then write 2 words. The end. And then get ready to start your new story. It's a very practical way of closing the book on one perspective and opening the book on your new perspective. It's a very functional process that you can work through. Let yourself go. Maybe this is a time that you've got an hour, a couple hours that you can sit down and just let it go. This is all the stuff that's been happening the last year, 5 years, lifetime. And then when you write that out in big letters at the end, write exactly that. The end. And then, I love this. We had Bruce Feiler, the best-selling author, on the podcast actually a couple of years ago. And he ended his book with a very powerful statement. He talked about the phrase, once upon a time. I've seen these things have a powerful impact in my own life when I've done them. Literally in that journal, after writing the end, begin your new story by saying, once upon a time. It sets the stage for the adventure that we're going to write. I was looking back at journalers of note, world changers, catalysts. That's us. That's why you're here. That's why you listen to the Catalyst 360 podcast. You want to have a positive impact. And people who have had a positive impact more often than not have been journalers. I've just looked at some of the names that are famous for their journaling. Marie Curie, the mother of modern physics, Leonardo da Vinci, Mark Twain, Oprah Winfrey, Arianna Huffington, Anne Frank, Charles Darwin, Thomas Edison. These were all journalers. They did it in a different way, every single one of them. But they brought their greatness out through their journaling. And that's the opportunity we have. Every single person listening to this, you have greatness in you. You have the potential to be a catalyst. But sometimes that greatness gets stuck. It's really interesting, and you can't see what I'm doing right now, but I'm basically pointing at my jawbones right next to my ear. That's the petrous bone. It's so interesting that the most dense bone of the body. And when we say it's stuck, we usually point to that area. It's stuck between here and here, the left and right petrous bone. It's part of the temporal bone of the skull. When we point to our temples, you're basically pointing to the petrous bone. Now, why do you care? You're like, Brad, not anatomy class. Please get through this section. Well, I think you'll be fascinated. Petrous comes from the Latin word petrosus, meaning stone-like or hard. your greatness, if you're leaving it stuck in your head, if you're not letting it come out, it's stuck between literally, not an exaggeration, not just some old Latin word, but literally the two most dense, the hardest bones of the body. It's stuck there. We're going to mine that. Journaling can be viewed as the world's most valuable mining tool, allowing us to excavate the greatness, the potential, the opportunities that every single person has. It can be the fuel for making a difference in the world. That's why you're here. You're wanting to make a difference. You're a catalyst, someone who wants to have that impact without using yourself up or burning out in the process. Okay, so step 2 is we want to add to that why. Consider, what is the world missing out on because of all that has remained undiscovered or unrevealed or unreflected inside of me? Or what junk is cluttering my garden and delaying the harvesting process? If you've got a notebook or a journal or something you can write on, hit pause for a moment and just jot down, what is the world missing out on because of everything that's remained undiscovered, unrevealed? Or what is that junk that's just all cluttered up and it's just sitting there and we're just getting it, you just can't get the good stuff out because there's just so much junk in there that we need to get off first. All right, so you got a few things written down there. Now, let's talk about various strategies. Now, you may want to jot a few of these down too, because some of them will be like, oh yeah, totally. And others would be like, not me. What works for one person, not the same as for another. It's just like exercise. I enjoy running. Other people are like, oh my gosh, that's the worst thing ever. Let's look for some ways to journal, some approaches to journaling that fit you. Don't try to fit you into somebody else's box. It just doesn't work. I'm just going to throw out a few different ideas, maybe jot a couple of these down if they hit you. Okay, so the first one, use it as a net to capture ideas from all sorts of outlets, podcasts, books, movies, experiences, quotes, or maybe even interesting people you meet for coffee. And you're like, wait a minute, I don't know that I meet interesting people for coffee. Why not? One of the things I've enjoyed doing over the years is literally reaching out to people that seem interesting to me. Maybe they're an author, maybe they're a politician, maybe they're a business owner, and being very respectful of their time, saying basically that. I enjoy meeting interesting people. You seem like a very interesting person. I'd love to take you out for coffee we'll keep it under an hour. I'll work around your schedule. It's amazing how many people say yes. I guess they like being called interesting. Maybe you come out of that meeting and you go to your car and you pull your journal out and you jot down some interesting stuff that you learned from that person. Or maybe you apply the same thing simply to podcasts, books, movies, experiences, quotes. Second thing, don't journal. Don't journal. I wrote a whole blog post on this, but it's similar to the concept of not committing to go for a run or go for a walk. You simply commit to putting your shoes on and going to the end of the driveway and see what happens. We can all do that. Really? My only goal that I have to do is to put my walking shoes on and walk to the end of my driveway? Yeah, let's just see how it goes. You're not committing to a mile. You're not even committing to 5 minutes. Just walk to the end of your driveway and see how you feel. Well, folks, you've overcome gravity at that point. Gravity is so powerful. It's getting out of that couch. It's getting outside the door with the shoes on. It's those things that limit us. Once you're there, you're like, you know what? It's a beautiful day out. I think it will continue. So same thing with the journal. Don't journal. Don't be like, oh, I need to journal. Super official time. No. Find a comfy chair, quiet spot, open up your notebook, your journal, your whatever you're using, grab your pen, and don't commit to anything. Maybe write the date down, and that counts as journaling. Now, good chance that you will then collect some thoughts, reflect on some things, consider some options, write out some things that happened the last couple of days, whatever it might be. But it's okay if you don't. The lack of pressure can be a game changer for you, where you're like, oh, I wrote the date. I journaled today. Woohoo! Good things will usually follow that. Next one, schedule a time to journal or put it on your to-do list once a week, 3 times a week, 4 times a week, whatever it is for you. I may be an oddball with this one, but this has been surprisingly powerful, such a simple step. I was journaling kind of, sort of. And then some of you heard on the 200th podcast with Dr. Bill Miller, the guy that created motivational interviewing. He did a live coaching session with me where we talked about journaling. And there has not been a week since that I haven't journaled at least 3 times a week. Yes, it was pretty cool to have the guy that created motivational interviewing walking me through this. But one of the big steps that came out of that was literally just put it on your calendar. Now, that may not work for you at all. For me, that's been a driver in many aspects of my life. If I put exercise on the calendar, it generally happens because, doggone, I want to check that thing off. So journaling has become the same thing. I literally just put it on 3 times during the week. And I don't always do it that day. Maybe I put it on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But if I journal Sunday, I'll go mark Monday off. If I journal Thursday and Friday, maybe that's Wednesday, Friday schedule. But the fact that it's on there, I want to check it off. So again, that doesn't work for everyone. It may not be your style, but it might be. Maybe you're more creative. Use different colors. One's for thoughts, one for discovery, one for strategies. Maybe you have drawings on one side or in certain pages and scribbles and stickers and different colors. Just have fun with it. This is your journal. You're not turning it into anyone. It's not being reviewed or audited or edited. This is you. The layout. This is something I've done probably for the last 30 years. I'll use the left side of the journal for ideas, quotes, discoveries, notes from books, and the right side is for the thoughts, the struggles, the reflections, the memories, the things that have happened. We had Steve Magnus on the podcast a few episodes ago, and he talked about, he's a best-selling author, really garnering a lot of attention for his work. And I asked him about his strategy for writing. And he said, Brad, one of my most effective ways is going for a walk. He just has this little notepad that he keeps with him when he goes for a walk and a little pen. And that way he doesn't have the distraction of the phone, because most people are like, well, you could just pull out your phone and write the notes down, right? Well, yeah, but when you do that, then check your email and, you got a text. And he turns his phone off. He has it with him on his walks just for safety, but he turns it off or puts it on airplane mode and uses the notebook to collect those thoughts and ideas and concepts as he's out for a walk. So that's something I've also initiated in the last year since that interview. And it's interesting, the impact it has. Gratitude list. You've heard this. It's garnered a lot of attention in recent years, and it's because it works. It's a very simple process, and maybe this is where you start with your journaling. Just every night before bed, you write down 1, 2, 3, 4 things that you're grateful for. All right, and then the last one in terms of strategies is create a vision section in your journal. Maybe you flip the journal over and you start in the back and you just start jotting down some things about the vision. You've likely heard our vision episodes. We do one a year. This year's is coming up in a few weeks. And it's basically, instead of having New Year's resolutions, it's creating the vision of the person I want to become over the next month, year, etc. The journal is a great place to start collecting ideas with this, because maybe you're like, I don't even know where to start. That's okay. Just what's a concept? Well, I really want to explore more. Okay, cool. So turn the journal over and just write explore or draw a picture of a mountain or something. And I really want to take into account my family a lot more. Like I want them to be front and center. Okay, so maybe you go back to that page and you draw a little target and family is right in the middle. So again, I'm just making stuff up as I go here. We'll get into that more in that episode. But the journal is a great place to collect those ideas. And then when it comes time to create that vision or that phrase or that verse or that song wording or whatever that's going to represent your year in the future, it's there. Like you've already pulled a lot of the stuff together. So awesome spot to have a vision section. How do we get started? If you're sitting there going, okay, I'm in, I want to do this thing, but I don't even know where to start. Let's talk about it. But the first thing I want to repeat, do not journal because you should, please, because that won't last. Only journal when you tap into the magnetic piece, when you tap into what it's going to bring to your life, the way it's going to improve the impact you're having, the life you're living, the level of joy that you're experiencing, and on and on. Should comes off the table. All right? There's no guilt in this. So let me give you some specifics. Here are some prompts that'll get you rolling on those days that you're like, I don't know. Like I've got my journal open, I've got my pen in my hand, but I just got nothing. So here are some prompts to get you going on those days. What brings you joy? What lights up your eyes? Obviously, that's related to the gratitude journal, but just think about in the last 24 hours, last week, last month, what has brought joy to my life? What has created that spark inside? On the other end, what drains you? And what sits at the core of that? So if what drains you is, I don't know, interacting with a certain person, go deeper. Yeah, sometimes it's the person, but usually there's something more. So try to get beneath the surface. Journal's a great place to do that. Another one, what would a great day look like? Not a pretty good day, not an okay day. Not a day that when people say, how's your day? You say, that's fine. It's a 4-letter word, folks. Let's avoid fine. What a great day look like? Next one, describe a dream goal maybe you're afraid to share with anyone else but you. Next, pick out a person in your life and write all the reasons you love them. And then maybe share a couple of those with them. Another one, journal about a significant memory from childhood. Create a self-portrait using words or images. Journal about the various roles you play in your daily life and maybe ways you can enhance some of those. Write a letter to your younger self about what to do when she gets to this moment in time. Or maybe more effectively, write a letter to you as the fill in the blank, the 80-year-old you, the 60-year-old you, the 40-year-old you, and then use that as a catalyst for the vision that you're living out. And then the last one, what lessons have you learned in the past 12 months or 12 days or 12 hours? What are those lessons? When you write them down, they stick. They don't just pass through in those 500,000 thoughts a day. They actually stick. We do something with them. We move forward. Think about what works for you in other areas of your life, like exercise, eating, that kind of stuff. I mentioned adding journaling to my calendar 3 times a week. Completely changed the outcomes. I went from journaling, kind of, sort of like the flossing thing, to dialed in, haven't missed it in over a year. That doesn't mean you should put it in your calendar. I'm saying that's what works for me in other things, and it worked in journaling. So what are the things that help you do the things that are new for you, help you create behavior change? Is it scheduling? Is it prepping something? Is it putting time aside? What is the strategy you use with your exercise? What is your strategy you use when you create a new eating plan? What is the process you use for these things where you have created positive behavior change, and how could you apply that to journaling? Next one, have a consistent time and place. Now, consistent in quotes, that might just be a consistent number of times a week. Maybe you like to go to various places, maybe sometimes a coffee shop, sometimes out, sitting on a picnic bench. It doesn't matter. But for others of you, it might be the same chair, might be the same spot. So decide what's consistent time and place for you, what that means, and then try to dial that in. And just to repeat one more time, folks, it is your journal. There is not a journal rule book. And if someone tells you that, I was going to say something else. Just ignore them. It's your journal. You do it the way you want to. I've had you think through earlier, what are your whys? Why do you want to move into this? Why do you want to create this as part of your regular routine? The more clear you are on those whys, the more consistent you'll be with actually doing it. So, some of the whys that I jotted down, I was just thinking, well, what would you say, Brad? So here's some of the things that I would say are the whys in terms of my own journaling habit. First one, wishing I understood my parents better. Not necessarily now. We have wonderful conversations now, but being able to understand what they were thinking, what they were going through during different phases of their life. There's no way to go back and collect that because all of our memories have changed. But I would love to go back and be able to read different things from different phases of my parents' life. And I'm hoping that while my journals are private now, once I'm gone, the kids are welcome to dig in. And I'm hoping that maybe they'll have some fun reliving that and seeing what I was thinking and being like, oh my gosh, he was as weird as we thought he was. Hopefully not too weird, but next one I wrote down is it's a catalyst to build silent reflection in my daily routine. I'm not good with that. I'm always doing stuff. There's always something going on. And the routine of having regular journaling builds silent reflection into that day on a consistent basis. Next one, I kind of referenced this earlier, but it clarifies my thoughts and my emotions when I write. I will often think by writing, and so it helps bring together a lot of random thoughts, ideas, struggles, opportunities into sometimes some actionable concepts, but at a minimum, at least I understand what my brain's doing a lot more after I spend a few minutes writing. Related to that, the opportunity to learn through this thing called life, not just learning from this thing called life, but literally as I'm going through it, By journaling, it helps me glean some lessons as I'm going through that process. A few of the things that I wrote down that I have learned from doing this. And again, I haven't been as consistent as I would like to be. The last year's been amazing. I was pretty darn good through college, but there were decades where I was not consistent, and I wish I had been. That would be really fun to look back on. But some of the lessons learned while I was writing. First one, patterns discovered. It's amazing. As I went back and read some of those college journals, I'm thinking about a lot of the same things. I'm approaching a lot of things in the same way. It was fascinating. And that can be a warning, like, really, Brad, let's try to tweak that one. You are a little bit older now. You're supposed to be wiser. But it's just interesting to look back on that. It allowed me to document stuff in our family. Not as, again, I totally dropped the ball. As our kids were born, life got really busy, and I used that as an excuse not to journal much. So a lot of the fun memories that would have been great to look back on the exactness, we have photos. It would have been really fun to have some of the writing around those activities and those periods of their lives, that kind of thing. So trying to do that now. The last one I jotted down here is a lot of times we, meaning I, am really good at rationalizing things. Like, I can spin something around in my head and be like, yeah, that's the way to do it. That's exactly what you should do. And then you say it out loud to someone and you're like, wait, what? You're essentially saying it out loud to yourself as you write that down. It allows you to take that spin machine that's going on in your brain and bring it back to reality. And as you're writing it, it forces you to think things through. Last step I want you to take here. Where do you see a value for journaling in your life? What are some of the key initial steps that would be most important as you move forward? My hope from this episode is that something shared provides a spark. Some view of that hidden gold in the corner of your eye that nudges this incredible tool in whatever form works best for you onto, or maybe back onto your radar screen as you move forward. Thanks for joining us for this special episode of the Catalyst 360 podcast. It is truly an honor to be spending a few minutes of your week with you, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate you as our listeners as we travel this journey together. This is Dr. Brad Cooper, the Catalyst Coaching Institute. Now, it's time to be a catalyst, writing and living out a story worth reading.